And surveyor another? I got an extra.
Oh, you're gonna be on candidate board with professionals.
Okay. I had some interesting conversations on the break before. People were asking about, what happens, people who violate these laws, and that's their business model. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And if I don't, raise your hand and bring it up, and we'll talk about your obligations as a professional. But in the meantime, we'll stick with 8762. We just finished trigger line item 5. The points or lines set during the performance of a survey. Where we left off was we have seen 5 separate definitions or instances in which a record of survey is required to be filed by law, says shall, and the word monument is not in those sections. That's where we left off. So I'm going to read through the thing, then we're going to go back through and talk about when a record of survey is not required, then we're going to talk about how the two read together. So item C, the record of survey required to be filed pursuant to this section shall be filed within 90 days after setting the boundary monuments during the performance of a field survey or within 90 days after completion of a field survey, whichever occurs first. And that's going to be the first instance of the word monuments at any time. The word there says shall. That means that you have to file this survey within 90 days after completion of a field survey. Pretty straightforward to what we've learned so far. It goes on to say that in the event that if you cannot comply with the 90 days, then you can send a letter to the county surveyor, and they give you some criteria that says, I did a survey out here, Dave Woolley did it, it was 89 days ago, I'm not going to have it done tomorrow, I would like to request some additional time, and there's a requirement in here. Now here's the unusual thing, is 90 days sounds like a lifetime to do a map. And I'm telling you, it's hard to get some maps done in 90 days for whatever reason there is. I have letters in probably 5 counties because I don't make the 90 days. Now, if I were to be involved in an action, board action for any sort, the fact that I have that letter is a get-out-of-jail-free card. And it doesn't take any amount of time to write these. And we update them periodically because sometimes we say, we think we can get it done in another 90 days. And on 89 plus 89 days, I'm not done, and so I update the letter. Interestingly, though, the county surveyors that I talked to, 2 of those counties have told me that I'm the only one who's ever submitted those. So I think I have a procedural problem that I'm the only guy in the entire county that can't get a map done in 90 days. So
You're the only one doing it.
Yeah, go ahead.
The term complete a field survey, does the mapping of a field survey fall under complete a field survey? I'm not trying to be tricky here. I'm trying to find out how the board and or the industry views the term complete a field survey. Wouldn't finishing the map be completing the survey?
I don't know that finishing the map would be completing the survey. Completing a field survey, my question would be, if it's not complete, why isn't it complete? What's left to get it done to be complete? Start just thinking of where are you in this process and why isn't it done? You know what I mean? There's no definitive answer to that, but those are the kind of questions that I would start asking. Why isn't it done? And what does the person from the public believe? Do they think you're done, or do they think you're coming back out? Question behind you, yeah.
Not also on that completing. Yep, this happens all the time. We go out and monuments don't check. You tell the client, like, material discrepancy, this is going to have to be a record of survey. It'd be a $500 fee. And they say, I'm not doing that. Never mind. At that point, you don't have to file anything about the discrepancy you found because you didn't complete the survey. Is that correct?
I would say that's the wrong answer across the board because I think you missed the first part of the class, but I'll walk through it. This is an example of you go out and you find a survey. We had this gentleman over here provide a good example. Their contract, for instance, not theirs, a contract says, I'm going to come out and I'm going to locate a fence line for $1,000, but in the event that we run into a material discrepancy or any of these items, we will be required to do a record of survey, and that will maybe cost $5,000. So the client says, I don't want to do that. So as soon as you find this material discrepancy, this issue, we want you to stop work. Well, you already found it. You already documented it. You know it exists. And the law doesn't say that a survey needs to be a complete parcel. The fact that you did a line, and these were monuments, and we show material discrepancy, and we talk about the definition of a material discrepancy, this is your record of survey right here. You found a material discrepancy. Nothing says I have to do the entire property. I found a problem. I'm aware of it. I'm obligated to file. There's no, what's a complete survey? That's complete at that point. I've documented a material discrepancy. If I choose not to go on, there we are. And that's my obligation. Yes?
I've heard the term monument recovery, and as a contract of services.
Mm-hmm.
And is that an attempt to get around this? Hey, can you come find my pins? As a monument recovery, I'm not looking for a survey. I just need my pins now.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what that is? Or?
I don't know. I'm familiar with some of those services and things, but it doesn't really make sense. I'll give you an example. If they're going to build a fence on this line, and you come out and you locate this monument and you locate this monument, the guy didn't do his certificate of correction. This is actually an offset monument. It's not occupying the position that it was meant to be. You went out for maybe $450 and told him to build a $10,000 wall, because if you take an instrument out, you would have found that it didn't fit. You have a material discrepancy. It doesn't really make sense that you would locate monuments, give them a map, tell them you can go to the county and get a map, get a metal detector, and go locate your own monuments. Why would I take on any kind of responsibility or liability like that on the expense of my license? Because they're going to say, he's a licensed surveyor. He told me that was the corner. It doesn't matter what I told him. I'm a licensed land surveyor. I was out there. Their understanding is that that is the line. It doesn't make sense that you would ever offer that service as a professional. Go ahead.
So, if you do go out and you just use a tape or even pacing, and you found those two, and they match what the map says, you don't know if there's a material discrepancy, but you look at it.
You don't even know if they're the right monuments. Here's the thing. Most people can measure very well. It's not exclusive to us. You can go to Home Depot. You can get 100-foot rag tape, 200-foot rag tape for $25. You can get a map. You can talk to your neighbor. You own a shovel. If that's what you want, I'll tell you how to do it. Go to Home Depot, get 100-foot rag tape. Go get your building plans. See if it shows you any kind of setback. I was having this discussion earlier. If you want to build a fence, it's not required that you have a survey. It's only if you build the fence on a property line that you want a survey. Anybody can go build a fence. Two neighbors can build a fence. I don't need to be involved with that transaction at all. But if you want to build it on the property line, now I need to get involved.
Yeah, a lot of city ordinances are doing that now. They're requiring you to, have a surveyor validate the position of your property.
Yeah, and are you content with
Before you
just
get a permit to
taking your locator and digging it up? Or would you be content to validate the property line that way? Stay out of the transaction. It would be my thing. But that's just my preference. That's nothing to do with the law. We can get sidetracked. Let's stay with the law here. But the point is that doesn't make sense from a professional. I talked about filing your letter. He or she shall, I'm midway through the paragraph, prior to the 90-day expiration, provide the county surveyor with a letter stating why he or she is unable to comply. Well, that tells you something else. I was telling you about setting controls in your system to make sure that things don't happen, maps sent out without draft, for instance. Well, this tells me that you need to know the status of that project, that where that survey is, the last day of your field work, so that you are under that 90 days for filing. You need to have some kind of a reminder, some kind of a file, or some kind of a method for determining when that time is. If you don't have that in place, you're probably not going to be in compliance. I don't know how it works if you were at 91 days or 105 days, I don't know, but why not just set up a system to catch it? Yeah, it's David.
Does that 90 days mean the filing as far as time to submit? You have that 90-day period to submit your record of survey to the county surveyor?
Yeah, you have 90 days after completion of a field survey.
Okay.
Yeah, or the setting of monuments. You have 90 days to submit it, not to be filed, but to submit it. Then once it's submitted, the county surveyor has, I believe, 20 days to review it. Calendar days or working days, who knows? Doesn't matter. Then you have 60 days to get the map back in. If you don't make your 60 days, you could be in line for a citation again. So you have to have another tracking system. It's tough to do if you do this type of work. We're always at 89 days, or 91 days, or 105 days. Where's the letter? Go ahead.
Is that the same in Corner Brook?
I don't know. We're going to read that. I won't speculate. So we go in, talk about that. E, any record of survey filed with the county surveyor shall, after being examined by him and her, be filed with the county recorder. So your map gets filed with the county recorder. Last, if the preparer of the record of survey provides a postage stamp, you provide them, they'll send you a copy of the map back. And that's what it says. That's not really, that's an administrative issue. Several county surveyors have different methods for getting information back to you or not. I'm not overly concerned with that as far as a license. So those are the requirements when a record of survey is required. Now, let's read the other side of it. When a record of survey is not required, 8765. This is on the bottom of page 10.
I have a question.
Yes?
It's actually on the previous topic.
Yep.
Just to go back on what, the whole, if you find a material discrepancy and there's clients that say, well, then don't finish the survey because they don't want to file a record of survey. Just so that we all know, like, is there can you think of an example off the top of your head where they didn't complete the survey, so they didn't file a record of survey, but it was caught, and then like they did, like how would
Yeah.
how would you get caught?
I'll give you some examples. How do you get caught?
Yeah, I just
Um,
not for like I think I did an example for everybody in this room.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good example so that you have it in your mind. Here's how you can get caught. You provide the client with a 8.5 by 11, 11 by 17 sketch showing them how the stakes along the line that wasn't shown on a deed. You know, you gave it to the contractor with some grades maybe. The other neighbor says, hey, wait a minute, how do you know that's on the property line? He gives it to the neighbor. The neighbor says, oh, the survey, well, you know, I don't know about this guy. I'm going to get my own survey. They transmit that work to the other surveyor. The guy's on the hook for a record of survey. That's one way to get caught in that sense. Another way to get caught is to prepare anything that goes out of your office, things that are in the hands of other people. For example, an ALTA land title survey. Those get dispersed. They're part of a financial closing transaction, and these things move around, these ALTA surveys. And the ALTA surveys, by the minimum standards set forth, many times are going to require a record of survey. Lines not shown on a map, lines become established by the board's definition. If you show a physical tie, or a tie from a physical feature such as a building corner, a fire hydrant, something like that, to a property line, that line becomes established. And that makes sense. I think building corners are just like monuments, you know, if you tie them to the survey. The line becomes established. Now you're required to do a record of survey. The ALTAs float around for years, and they're always in circulation. And so people will hand that to another surveyor. That's how you get caught. Another way is you do a parcel map, tract map, final map, and for whatever reason you don't complete it, but you did a field survey on it, established the lines, submitted the map for the first check to the county, which would be evidence of a completed survey. The job doesn't go through. The guy goes bankrupt, didn't even pay you for the work you'd done that before. Well, by the virtue that map was submitted for a first check, that is a completed field survey. The tentative, as long as the tentative is active, you have grounds to stand on because maybe you will finish it. But you know in your heart of hearts that tentative map probably isn't coming back, and if it comes back, it's probably not going to be under yours when we're talking about people monumenting other maps. You would be required to do a record of survey on that. How how would you not be? When the tentative map expires, so you're not going to be doing a final map or a parcel map, and you completed a field survey as evidenced by submitting a map to the county for review. The interior lines would have to come off because they weren't created, so you have an exterior boundary. That's another way to get caught.
What if, I don't want to play too much what ifs here because I know we don't have a lot of time, but in that particular case, in tentative, you send a new tentative, what if you never put boots on the ground?
Well, then you're not required because as we talked earlier, it's a field survey in conformance with the practice of land surveying. And so if you weren't ever in the field, you could never be required to do it.
And also to clarify, just for a minute, you're not going to get, you go, say you do an Alta survey, because I've had this exact situation. We got an Alta survey. Oh, so-and-so did the Alta survey. They never filed a map. I mean, they even put it in for first checking, but never finished it. You know, so on, et cetera. Unless you report that person or that person gets reported to the board, they're going to walk, right? I mean, there's no.
Well, somebody else might report them next year.
The point is somebody has to report them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the reason I say that is because as licensed surveyor, anybody can report anybody, but I've been really frustrated, like, well, so-and-so doesn't file corner records. Well, then we should file it. Well, I don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah,
You know,
we'll talk about that at the end, about our professional obligations, because that's a lot of what we're doing. But let's go through, and remind me to bring that up. 8765 is when a record of survey is not required. I'm going to give you guys just like 5 minutes to read through that section and, check it out. It's a relatively short section, probably won't even give you 5 minutes. Read through it and think of it as the complementary section to 8762 when a record survey is required. All right, looks like everybody's kind of done with this. So here's when a record of survey is not required. When it's made by a public officer in his or her official capacity and a reproducible copy thereof showing all data required per section 8764, except the county recorder's statement, has been filed with the county surveyor or the county in which the land is located, in the county in which land is located. Basically, if you're a county surveyor is an officer, and what the short version of an officer is an officer is, when they're hired, the board of supervisors that would hire them cannot dictate to them how they do their job because they're an officer. And they're like one of 12 officers in the state structure, something of interest. So if the county surveyor goes out and does a survey, he has to do a record of survey that complies with section 8764 with the only exception of not adding the county recorder certificate. But then he also has to create an indexing system to make it available to you. I would be inclined to just put a county recorder certificate on it and file it at that point. And, the work's done. That's it. That's an exception. Bureau of Land Management, public lands, they're not required to file records of survey. But if you're a contractor for the Bureau of Land Management or the United States Forest Service, you are required to file records of survey. You do not have that exemption. Something there. That's been opined on in the case law. See, when the map is in preparation for and shall be recorded under the provisions of the Subdivision Map Act. If you're doing a parcel map or a tract map, final map, you're not required to do a record of survey. Makes sense. You don't need two maps showing the same thing. But that also speaks to the point when your tentative map, when your map doesn't get filed, you're not doing a final map or tract map anymore. You've established a boundary and you've completed a field survey as evidenced by your first check. See how it complements it? D, when the survey is a retracement of lines shown on a subdivision map, official map, or record of survey where no material discrepancies with those records are found and sufficient monumentation is found to establish the precise location of the property corners thereon. Provided that a corner record is filed for any property corners which are set, reset, or found to be of a different character than indicated by prior records. For the purpose of this subdivision, a material discrepancy is limited to a material discrepancy in the positions of points or lines or in dimensions. And that answers your question earlier. The question earlier was, well, the map says that they set a brass cap and pipe, and you go out and you find a spike in a washer, same LS number. Is that a material discrepancy? No. It's points and lines and dimensions, not materials of the pipe. So you could file a corner record in that instance, providing these criteria were there. And the last section pertains to the interior of mobile home parks. And if you guys know anything about the subdivision of mobile home parks, there's a whole separate process that we could spend the rest of the day talking about. So we'll just say that that's it. Go ahead.
In A, if they don't do that, if they don't index it and make it available after they've done a survey that they've established boundaries, what's the recourse? I mean, what's the punishment if they don't do that?
Well, a county surveyor is licensed. Let's just say a traditional, like a licensed land surveyor as opposed to a director of public works. They're subject to the same laws all of us are subject to. Their licenses could be in jeopardy as much as anybody else's because they're licensed as individuals and they have the same responsibilities as anybody else in the room. So, I mean, a county surveyor is not immune from any of that. He could be in trouble with and get an action filed against his license. So we go through the complementary. So when you read this, here's a couple of key things. If you have a meets and bounds description and it hasn't shown up on a map before, you can't do a corner record. If you have a material discrepancy, which is under your professional purview to some extent, then you cannot do a corner record. If you, go ahead.
Is there a rule of thumb when you determine the material discrepancy when it comes to like dimensions of points or lines, like you're off by,
I don't think there is. I don't think there's a rule of thumb because it's fact driven. It depends on what you're retracing, what was there before, what you're seeing now. I don't think you can put a quantity on it to the 100th or to the 10th or even to the foot. I think it's fact driven. Every scenario, if I gave you a rule of thumb, it might not apply to the other 9 rules of thumb. And that's part of the professional judgment that you need to develop. And how you develop that is, again, where we started. What could go wrong? What could be a problem here? How could this person be damaged? Here's an example of how somebody could be damaged. Remember I gave you just the fake material discrepancy here where we had half a foot and 100 feet? And I said the reason I think this is a material discrepancy, regardless of the scenario, is if this monument was destroyed and somebody else went back and they prorated it, would the prorated location be in the same location as the original? And the answer is no. Now, what could happen? How bad is that? So you start looking at your survey and how many monuments, and you start just saying, what if this one got destroyed? What if that one got destroyed? In the course of this, would somebody put it back in a location that is reasonable? If the answer is no, you probably have a material discrepancy. Here's an example of how this goes bad. You go out and you find 3 original monuments. You do your location survey. Somebody brought that up earlier. And you find this, and you say, there's your line to do your fence line. And everything's really the way it should be. You found original monuments. It doesn't quite agree with the map, but they built a fence, string lining between the monuments. You don't file the map. I come back 5 years later. We got a new homeowner 2 here. He hires me to do this other line, and in the course of my work, I find this problem. But this monument's gone now. So I do the proper thing, and I prorate in here, and I hold this monument, and I tell him, and by the way, your neighbor's fence is encroaching on your property by about 1/2 foot to 0 in the back. Now we have a problem. Owner 1 says, that can't be, because I had a survey done, and the surveyor came out and, found the monuments, and this fence was built with a string line right between those monuments. And I say, I have no evidence of that. I don't know that. Following the rules of construction, that fence is encroaching. That's an example of where the public, now they're into a situation where there may be litigation, lot line adjustments, more cost. I would say that that's a material discrepancy. The fence is actually in the right location, but I do not have the evidence of that. When I came up behind you as a surveyor, I followed and established the line based on the evidence available. How are they protected? That's a material discrepancy. Go ahead.
Is there a tolerance to that? Like, do you have a tolerance to that? Because, in your particular case, it's 1/2 foot. What if it was a 10th? And if you prorated it back in, it might be a 10th off of your line or something like that. Are you still going to say that's a material discrepancy? You understand what I'm saying?
It depends, because if you're going to build a wood fence here, and I have a 10th or something like that, I could tell them just crowd it on this side a little bit. I'm going to maybe do a corner record, because maybe I don't think that's material, because it's a wood fence that's this wide, and I'm going to be on the center of the post or left the center of the post, going from a 10th to 0. So maybe that's not a material discrepancy. In a public land situation, I could have on the far side of it, let's say a foot, because the rock mound is this big. By the time I get to the center of the section, I'm 1/2 foot. By the time I get to the west quarter corner, I'm 0. What's the difference? If it's publicly held land, there aren't going to be any fences built on that. There aren't going to be homes. There aren't going to be any encroachments. Maybe not a material discrepancy, because what could happen? What's the scenario? If somebody were to want to replace that monument that's a foot off, they're still in the mound. Maybe that's not. So I think as a professional, you want to evaluate the facts. You want to make sure that you're not trying to skirt the law. You're not trying to get around anything, and you're applying judgment to the situation. And I think the judgment will clear the way for you. Your professional judgment will clear the way. Sometimes a 10th will be fine. Sometimes a foot might be okay. And sometimes a 10th is absolutely not acceptable. And that's what you have to develop. And how was it set originally? Who's relied on it? There's a lot of factors there. But I try to stay away from quantifying it to the 100th or to the foot. That's a judgment.
That's what I wanted to get.
You had a question.
Yeah, and subsection D, where it says that I go and retrace a map, a subdivision map.
Mm-hmm.
My distances aren't going to match what anybody else's are in this room. Is this saying that if I'm within reason, I don't have to file the record of survey?
Well, I would say yes. You're not. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're doing found originals, and let's just say it's the 10th that was brought up. This is 100.1, monument to monument, and this is 50, and this is 50.1. And this monument's not there. So you found substantial monuments, like it says, they use an interesting word here, and I want to use it also. Sufficient monumentation is found to establish the precise location. So I have a 10th here, and this is 50 record. So now this lot becomes 50.05. This lot becomes 50.05. I don't have a material discrepancy. I think that's a precise location. I don't measure much better than that. I don't think that I would need to file anything in this instance.
Let me take it a different scenario.
Uh-huh.
You find the monument. The property changes ownership. The new owner wants you to go out there and verify what's there. All the monuments are in. Your distances are going to change from what's there. Does this say that I don't have to file a record of survey?
Depends. Do you have a material discrepancy?
No.
Then you probably don't have. You don't have to file. You don't have to file then. But you wouldn't have to file in that instance, a corner record or a record of survey. The idea isn't to burden the public with this, it's to preserve the records and the monuments. But if that guy says that I've set 2-inch iron pipes with brass tag LS1234, and you go out and you find a 1-inch iron pipe LS1234, you're filing a corner record. If you go out and it says set 2-inch iron pipe with a brass disc and you find a spike and washer, you're filing a corner record. What you'll find if you follow the law as it's written is you are going to find very few instances that you're not filing something. And here's where that comes from. Reading 8765D, it says, provided that a corner record is filed for any property corners which are set, reset, or found to be of a different character. So if everything is original, everything is shown on the map, and everything is within your tolerance as a professional of being in conformance with that map, you're fine. You start finding no reference monuments, you start finding monuments that are of a different character, you're filing something. It's just the question isn't whether you're going to file something, it's whether you're filing a corner record or a record of survey. Yes?
Is the previous surveyor on the hook for not filing that?
If you can find him, if he's alive, yes, he is. You know, but if it's a 2x2 stake with a tack, you know, but if you have some work product that shows that, yeah, absolutely, they're on the hook for that. They need to file, and they can't remove these monuments.
One more part of that is, what's the county or the city on the hook for? Because a lot of times you go out and you find these monuments, and they're set, they're not punched. They've never completed the final part of that survey.
They're on the hook. They have, monuments have to have records. What record it is, the law dictates and the circumstance dictates. But they have to have some filing system of some record. It's to protect the public. Go ahead.
Can't they replace that monument though? Let's say, oh, my crew guys ran out of 1-inch iron pipes, and so they slammed in a rebar or something.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to have something out there, and you call them and say, well, look, I found a rebar and your record says 1-inch iron pipe. Okay, my crew will be back out there to reset that monument tomorrow.
Or I'll file a certificate of correction.
Or
Or I'll file a corner record on my record of survey showing the change of monumentation. The idea is it's just to get the records in there and get them preserved. And it's to protect the public. It's nothing to do with what you like to do or don't like to do. It's really the law. And so if you find a no reference monument and it's of a different character, so you say, well, what's a different character? 1-inch, 2-inch, it's still a pipe. Well, that's going to get us into the next section, 8764, what's required on a record survey. You had a question?
Yes. Redevelopment agencies, they buy property, they go to subdivide the property, within the contract, the surveyor goes out there, sets monuments all over, but because the state of California dissolving the redevelopment agencies, they no longer own the property. But your monuments are in the ground. They've never been used for any purpose.
How do you know? How do you know that?
So then, if you put the steel in the ground, you have to file a record of survey.
Or a corner record.
Or a corner record.
Or a corner record. Yes.
Okay.
You cannot remove monuments once you set them. If you remove the monuments, ideally you're supposed to file another record. Or a record showing, hey, I had a monument here and I took it out. Because you don't know who relied on that. And there's no time frame on that. If you set a monument in the ground, you're obligated to file a record. If you remove that monument, you will get in trouble for that also, without filing a record. But the law does allow for removal. Any questions? Because then we're going to go into the next section.
No,
Okay.
that's common, and like when I work for the water department, and we'll have to go through and pull corners that are gonna be destroyed because of putting pipes in the ground, et cetera, and we'll file a corner record.
Yeah, file a corner record and get it. So you say, well, geez, I have all these monuments, I have 5 monuments, and I have one that's no reference. You know what? I just won't show it. That way I don't have to file a record, right? Because, it's the only thing that it's requiring me is I have one no reference monument. So what is required to be shown on a record of survey? We're going to look at section 8764. This is page 9 of 29. Technical requirements. The record of survey shall show the applicable provisions of the following consistent with the purpose of survey. Notice the word shall there again. There we are. All monuments found. What's all mean to anybody in the room? See? All found monuments. Okay? Set, reset, replaced, or removed. See that? Removed. Oh, the client didn't pay me. I'm going to go out and remove the monuments. Okay. Show me on the record survey where they were before and tell me that you took them out. Why remove them at that point? Doesn't make sense. You're just making more work. Just file your map. Describing their kind, size, location, and any other data relating thereto. Okay, this one sentence is going to take a few minutes to go through. All found monuments, we know what that means. Describing their kind, size, and location. How many guys have seen a map or a work product that says FDSPK? Huh? FD, now this is the law. SPK. All right, let's just think about this. FD means found. SPK. Boat spike, gear spike, cut spike, round head spike, square head spike. What? Railroad spike. There's a lot more. There's the survey marker spikes and mag nails. They make a mag spike. Gin spike or gear spike. So, are you in compliance with the law when you do FD, SPK? I think it's pretty clear that it says describing their kind. I got 8 of them. That's important. Am I in compliance with the law? I'm not. And here's why it's important. Because if you tell me that you set a square-headed spike tagged LS1234, and I come up there and I'm looking at a gear spike or a gin spike, and I can't read the tag anymore, that's not your monument. That monument has a different value as far as evidence goes. If you told me that you set a gear spike, it's LS1234, and I have a gear spike but I can't read the numbers, that has a different set of values because I think that might be your spike. That's why this, remember when we talked about negligence per se, violating the law? I think that's pretty clear. If you have crews collecting data like this, you have a problem as a licensed professional. What else do we have here? Size. You found a 1-inch iron pipe. The map said 2-inch iron pipe. It doesn't really matter as long as the tag is legible and readable at that point, right? It's still the same guy's work. But when the tag's gone, your map says 2-inch iron pipe. I'm looking at a 1-inch iron pipe. Is that the original monument? Original monuments have so much precedence. I think that's something that you need to file a corner record on. It sounds reasonable to 8765, right?
So would you file a corner record if you go out in the field and you find a pipe, but they measure the inside diameter, but quote the outside diameter on the map?
It's like you're reading my mind. That's where we're going next. Pipe is measured, steel pipe is measured by the inside diameter. When you buy pipe, it's spec'd. There's a ANSI, ANSI specification, it's interior. PVC and plastic pipes, exterior. So we just went through the FDSPK. FDIP, is that sufficient? Inside diameter or outside diameter? I think you need to know. If it's mushroomed out, maybe you can't tell. You can dig down, though. You guys can see underneath of a mushroomed pipe the diameter on that. I don't care if you give me which one you give me, the interior or the exterior. If the tag's gone and you said it's 2.5-inch OD, outside diameter, IP, I can measure that 2 inches. But I think if you don't tell me what it is, interior or exterior, now I'm faced with a decision in balancing my evidence later. The tag's gone. Is this the same pipe that he found? It's a good question. That's where we're going. So there's the kind. Okay, galvanized pipe, iron pipe, cast iron pipe. All that stuff fits into the kind, I would say. I don't think FDIP covers it. I don't think that is in compliance with the law. And I tell you, a lot of what we talk about is also, I'm talking about putting the controls in place as a professional to make sure that this gets done properly because it's your license. And it doesn't matter how many times you've done it and how many times it's never been a problem. When it's your license, this is one of those things that'll come to the top. Most of the data collectors, particularly the earlier ones, only had a character window of 18 characters. A lot of data collectors are limited to 18 characters. So you go FD period, I period, P period. I'm already 7 into my 18, and I haven't even given you a tag number. Let's go BR period, brass, L, S, 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't have any room for anything else, right?
Wouldn't you eliminate the periods in that instance? Just
Well,
to try to truncate it?
not whether you would. What is your field crew going to do? It's a lot easier to push the period, yeah.
I was going to say, in that space, but see page 7 of the field notes, you can write the full description there. That's what we did.
Well, if you're going to see page 7, why don't you just say nothing, MON, so that they have to go look at it. It's putting controls in place. Do what you want. But the point is we all do these shortcut systems, and you have these characters, and whatever it is, you're going to give up brass or aluminum, you're going to give up boat spike, gear spike, cut spike to save space. If you require your field crews to write out their descriptions on field note paper, for instance, and not allow the digital aspect, it allows for them to put a lot of this important information into the record and keep you in the law. That's what I do. You have to come up with your own system. But mine, and here's how we do it. We number our systems, and this is just an idea for controlling. If a monument is a found monument in our company, it's a 100 series monument. First found monument's 100. If it's a set control point, those are 200 series numbers. So if I see a 200 series number, I may not be concerned with that description because I know it's a set point, Magnell washer or whatever. And then, we have this. So then the 100s, the guys just number them and we position them throughout the day. Then they go back and they describe them most of the time. Sometimes they'll describe them on the front end, but they describe them because there's a safety issue involved there. I have a guy on the street and he's down there with a wire brush and he's trying to scrub this monument out. And I have a guy standing up taking the notes. He's saying, what's the diameter? Because they're kind of checking each other because, it gets hot and people tend to relax sometimes, get tired of the day. But if you have two guys, they're checking each other and there's a safety. I got a guy standing up writing it down, asking him, what's the diameter? That's all he has to do is ask. 2 inch. The guy has to pull his tape out. So we have complementary systems to put the controls in place to make sure that we get these issues handled. Depths. Here's something interesting. And location, given any other data relating there too. Okay, 2-inch iron pipe, I find a 2-inch iron pipe. You said it was down 2 feet. I'm looking at something flush. Different set of evidence. I need to know where you found that. If you say it's down 2 feet, I'm digging before I'm sounding. I'm going to start digging it out. I know that I have an expectation. So if you don't have depth, maybe you're not making it, because it's more evidence. He says he found it down 2 feet. It was 2 inches, tagged LS1234. I found a 2-inch iron pipe down 2 feet, no tag. Different set of evidence. Make sense? That's only item 1. Bearings, witness monuments, basis of bearings, lengths and lines, scale, north arrow. Self-explanatory. Legal designation of the property in which the survey is located, and the date or time period of the survey. Got to have a data survey, which county you're in, which city you're in, so on and so forth. The relationship of those portions of adjacent tracts, streets, or senior conveyances which have common lines with the survey. That says a lot. Do you think when they say the adjacent, they want you just to ghost in tract 1, 2, 3, 4's next door? Or do you think when they say senior conveyance, they want to know the relationship of the property you're surveying to the relationship of the joiner? The idea is that they have a common line. So when you establish one line, you establish another. If you have a title policy or a deed, and it's a meets and bounds, for instance, of another portion, can you properly establish that deed without looking at the adjacent deeds? The adjacent descriptions, the adjoiners. I would say no. So if you're working right out of a policy and you're putting math on the ground from a title policy and you're not looking at the adjoiners, you're probably failing at your job and you're probably going to be negligent. That's just the way that works out. Because how much time have you guys, as prospective test takers, how many scenarios have you been through with gaps, overlaps, right? You get tested on that. You guys have been studying that a lot. If you don't pull the adjacent documents, you're never going to find a gap or an overlap. How could you? I'll give you an example, real simple. $100-foot lot. East 50, west 50. That makes sense. We'll put some dates on here. 1926, 1930. If you put in the east 50 feet, it'll always be, wow. That's pretty interesting. If you do that, you're going to have 50 feet. And how would you have anything more or less than 50 feet? Now, suppose you go out and you do a field survey. Well, let's say you're going to do the west. They're on it. Let's say you do the junior parcel. You establish the west 50 feet. The client hands you the deed, hands you the title policy. You go over 50 feet and you stake out the line. Now, you pull the adjacent, and it's east 50. You come out here and you do a field survey, and it's 99 feet. You have an overlap. You had no idea. You laid off 50 feet. Let's say you were putting in a block wall. Let's say now you had just put in a wall that is 1 foot onto the adjoiner's property. Right? How can you do one of these surveys with these type of descriptions, meets and bounds, without looking at the adjoiners? You'll never find a gap or an overlap without doing that. Gaps and overlaps relate back to property rights, what we're talking about. Now, wouldn't the public be best served and protected by being able to identify these and possibly rectify them? If you're not identifying them by going through the process, have you met the law? No, you're putting math on the ground. Doesn't apply. That's what that means. Yes?
Seems like there's been a little bit of confusion when studying for the test. If the description was the person on the west side had 50 feet and the person that had the westerly 50 feet and the person on the east side had the easterly 50 feet, and say it was 101 feet. For the test, what would your answer be?
For the test?
Yeah.
Gaps exist. There would be a gap in the property there, and it would be in no, it would be the gap would belong to the original grantor in a test situation. And that's very consistent. So anyway, that's an 8-hour class just on that question alone.
That's kind of been complicated. You said small strips. You wouldn't do it in big strips.
I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll tell you what you do. You guys, because that is a big, long discussion, go on the CLSA forum, on the state one. There's a number of, there's two very, very lengthy discussions. There's one that's recent, and it's in there. There's like 4,000 views of it that discuss that at length. And what your goal is to pass the test.
What is it? I'm sorry, say that again.
The CLSA forum, the state, it's californiasurveyors.org. And then go under forum. There's some very long discussions on gaps. Your goal is to pass the test. Go ahead.
And note that something like this came in the last test, but they don't clean that up. They provide chain of time and all the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it goes to senior and all the stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
don't bounce it in that problem.
Yeah, and be careful where you get your information, any information, even the information I give you. Read this stuff, understand it, talk to other people about it. Be careful where you get your information. Your goal is to pass the test. That's a very complex question in a lot of aspects, and you are not authorized to determine ownership. You determine boundaries. Ownership is a different question. This is a question of ownership. So, pass the test and then spend the rest of your career trying to figure out exactly how you handle that. Seriously. It's very consistent. And they want to know, do you know the difference between boundary lines and ownership? We'll leave it at that. Read the form. Okay, 8764E, Memorandum of Oaths. We talked about oaths earlier. You need to make a notation onto the oaths. G, any other data necessary for the intelligent interpretation of various items and locations of points, lines, areas shown, or convenient for the identification for the survey or surveyor, as may be determined by the surveyor, is what that says, preparing the record of survey. So you can put a lot of information on there so that it makes the survey retraceable. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is preserve the evidence, notice the records that you identified, let people know that there's an owner out there that has reasonably relied on the survey you've conducted, and I need to know, even if you didn't do a good survey by whoever measures that, bad surveys in the record are just as important or more important than good surveys, because we need to know who was out there and what they did. That's the perspective. Going to the next line under G, the record of survey shall show, again, either graphically or by note, the reason or reasons, if any, why the mandatory filing provisions 1 through 5, inclusive of 8762B. Why are you filing this record of survey? Material discrepancy, alternate solutions, deeds established by lines not shown on a map, material alternate solutions. You have to let them know why. And lastly, very importantly, the record of survey need not consist of an entire property. So you went out, back to our picture, you discovered a material discrepancy, and you said, I quit. You're doing a record of survey of one line. The record of survey need not consist of an entire property. Mr. Woolley, why did you quit surveying? I found a material discrepancy. That's exactly it. My client didn't want to pay for it. Where's that provision that says, oh, your client didn't want to pay for it? You're not obligated. We've read the whole law. It doesn't say anything like that. Whether your client pays you or not has nothing to do with the decisions you make from that moment forward. It's your license. What are you going to do without it? It's going to be a citation. The board certainly will require you to do the record of survey. There's nothing you can say to them that is going to absolve you of your responsibility. There's absolutely no provision in there. And so I'll do the math, because this is what I kind of, to put it in there. Here's what they do to you. To those that don't know, here's what they do to you if you get caught doing this. They say, you're required to do a record of survey, Mr. Woolley. And I say, well, I only charged $1,000. I was surveying the tree line. And they say, that's okay. You got $1,000 to put towards your record of survey. You're going to be doing the record of survey. And you say, well, geez, is this a new law? I didn't set monuments. Doesn't matter. We all read the law in here. The word monuments isn't even in the first 5 sections. So that's not going to get you off the hook. Remember, the complete sentence is, I didn't set monuments, comma, therefore they won't know I was here. That's not a good excuse. So then we go to the next item. You say, well, I don't think I'm required to do it, and I'm not going to. So then it goes from a good guy, do the right thing, to a citation. So now not only are you going to be out the money that was required to file the record of survey, but you will be cited, and you'll be paying a fine on that. And the fine could and likely will include the cost of the investigation, because the board has to investigate. The people who do this stuff, they send it out to a technical expert, and they write a report. And the written report is very detailed, and you're paying that bill. So you didn't have enough money, and now you're accumulating a bigger bill. So you still don't comply, so then it goes to a disciplinary action. The disciplinary actions regularly include a handful of things. You have to take 2 college-level courses. We have some college students in here, I'm sure. College-level course is 18 weeks for like a 3-unit class. You have to take 2 of them. So in not wanting to spend your money, you've just obligated yourself to 36 weeks of class if you take them back to back as opposed to the same time. So you have 36 night classes because you work during the day. You may not have a college close by, so you have the travel to and from, or the Saturdays, or the web experience, whatever it is. So now you have that. Okay, still not convinced. Okay, next you have to notify your clients of your disciplinary action. So you have to notify your clients by certified mail. So you have a handful of clients, you have 40 of them, and this is all at their discretion. They can say, okay, Dave, we want you to notify your 40 clients that you have now, or your employer that you work for, that you have a disciplinary action on your license. And anytime during your probation, they can require you to do that again. So you get 40 new clients, the other 40 left, and you know, as a condition of your probation, they can make you notify them again. I don't think you can put a dollar amount on what that actually cost you, because you'll never know. But if you're providing professional services as opposed to commodities, it's competitive in a different way than it is like curb stakes per day. It's competitive as you have on a qualification-based selection, you have several good firms, and they're all equally capable. They need to have a way of separating out A from B and B from C in the selection process. Well, geez, I got that letter in the mail saying Dave doesn't always follow the laws. He's D, because that separates me from them. It makes their job easier. You'll never know how much weight that would cost you. And at the end of the day, you still have to file the record of survey. So it doesn't make sense from a business standpoint and the cost of your license, even taking a nick, to do this, to skirt the law. Now, you can do it and you can get away with it. Go ahead.
What's the actual cost to file a record?
It's county dependent. Orange County, where I'm from, doesn't cost anything to file a record of survey. Riverside County, directly adjacent, I submitted 2 records of survey last year, and my checking deposit, which means they could ask for more money, my deposit for those 2 records of survey was like $4,500. Yeah. Yeah. And I think in my area, they're generally around $500. You know, San Diego, San Bernardino, but it doesn't matter. Here's the thing. People complain about the cost of a record of survey, and this is all periphery to the law, but it's to kind of give you guys a sense, because I don't want to see you learn the law, learn Brown, learn the manual, go past the test, and then find yourself in this situation. It's very, very important. So, yeah.
Why is this one sentence even on there then?
What?
The record of survey need not consist of a survey of an entire property. Why would they even put it there if it's so completely against everything that says?
It's not completely against. Remember that single line I showed you with the material discrepancy? That's where the survey started and stopped. I just have a single line survey. I think that's sufficient.
Oh, okay.
You
I
know?
thought we were saying you would survey the adjoiners and show the entire property.
Yeah, that's in the case of where I completed a survey where this situation here, and let's say that's the right-of-way, that's a complete survey. Another monument, this is the center line. That's a complete survey. I don't need to look at the public in this. It's a complete survey. What they're saying is I don't need to do this to make that map. There's a lot of surveys. If you're surveying the first few lines of something, maybe some kind of meets and bounds, Edison line, for instance, I wouldn't want to survey the entire Edison right-of-way to catch my section. Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you have an idea why in the Professional Land Surveyors Act it requires you to process a record of survey through the county surveyor and not the local jurisdiction?
County surveyor is tasked with that. That's part of their job, their official duties. You're talking about as opposed to a city?
Yeah.
They're filed at the county recorder's office.
Right, but the cities are integral in the processing of a lot of information, and they may know something the county isn't aware of, but yet I've had people tell me I don't have to process it through you being the city. They just take it to the county recorders, and that can cause problems.
It can cause problems if the surveyor doesn't do the research at the city that's required, the evidence. The city records, if they have records or evidence, that surveyor is tasked with knowing or finding that information and putting it into the county surveyors, onto the record of survey and filed at the county surveyor's office. I don't see where a city on a where they can't impose conditions like on a subdivision map, tentative map, zoning issues, where they would have any review over a record of survey, which is really a surveyor's opinion put down on paper. Does that make sense? I just don't see a place for them in the process.
It just seems like it's a double check to make sure that it's correct and you're not gonna run into
Some surveyors don't even want the first check. You're going to be hard pressed to get a double check. They don't want the first check. So anyway, that's the context of the Land Surveyors Act.
Are the penalties written out somewhere?
Yes, they are. The penalties of what they can do to you are in the board rules in the back, the California Code of Regulations, 400 series. And I haven't even told you all the penalties. Those are just the ones that are routinely handed out. And don't take my word for it. You're responsible to research this and understand it, because if you're not complying with the law, your pals that don't comply with the law, that maybe even mentored you, aren't going to be there to help you. You're on your own. When you go to the board and you have an issue, you are on your own. You either followed the law or you didn't. And if you have other scofflaw buddies, they're not going to go up there and say, I do that all the time. He's a good guy. You're on your own. And so you need to consider that. Now the odds are in your favor. I always imagine it like a big old bait ball, school of fish. You know, the fish going in there, they aren't going to get all of you. The chances are you're going to make it. You might even make it an entire career. But when it comes down on you, you're on your own, and it's going to run its course all the way through. And if you have 1 or 2 or 3 of these, how much is it? Let's just do some math. This is off the topic of the law, kind of. We'll use the survey we were talking about earlier. We have a $1,000 tree line survey, and we encounter a $5,000 record of survey liability. And you can make it an ALTA and a record of survey liability. You can make any scenario you want. Okay, this is the cost of the survey. And then we know that we have a multiplier for benefits and everything else. So the cost out the door for this might be in the neighborhood of, we'll say $3,500. You have a profitable business. You realize 20% on there, so 20% profit. That's a very profitable survey business. So that's $200 for every 1,000 times 5, $2,000, $3,500. This is out of pocket. Okay, that same model applied to your original $1,000 survey. So your profit on that was expected to be about $200. And let's make it a $2,000 survey. Now it's $400. How many of these profitable surveys do you need to do to get back to even just based on the one? That's a business model. I would have to do 10 profitable surveys to get real close, 9 profitable surveys to get back to even again. And that's just based on one survey. That's the kind of liability that you're incurring. You're putting yourself in harm's way, and even if you want to comply with the law and file your records of survey and not have to take the classes, there could be a point, and there will be a point, that if this is your model, you can't comply with the law even if you want to. If you get to the point where you cannot comply with the law, financially or otherwise, you will lose your license, because you cannot